Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our 2023 Treating the Whole Person Optimizing Wellness Virtual Conference. Before we get going this evening, I want to ensure that we acknowledge CRPS Awareness Month. And today is the 10th annual Color the World Orange for CRPS/RSD Awareness. Thank you once again to the entire team at Color the World Orange for being amazing, as it is an independent initiative that we are so thankful for. And speaking of who we are, my name is Alexis Johnson. I'm the social media manager here at RSDSA. I'm joined by Jim Roach, Executive Vice President and Director of RSDSA, and disability activist, author, and CRPS warrior, Tara Moss. Since 1999, Tara Moss has written 14 best-selling books, published in 19 countries and 13 languages, including Advocacy Handbook for Women and Girls Speaking Out, and her #1 nonfiction best-selling memoir, The Fictional Woman. And I hear that she has a few books near her, so I'm sure we'll hear more about a few of her other books throughout this evening. As a prominent mobility aid user with CRPS, she brings advocacy and visibility to issues of disability and chronic pain, and the need to normalize mobility aids through both her fiction and nonfiction and her many media appearances. In 2020, she accepted the honorary role of Pain Champion with Pain Australia. And in 2021, she was chosen as the global change maker by Conscious Being magazine for her disability and chronic pain activism. She is a 2022 recipient of the Honorary Citizen Award for the City of Victoria for her work on accessibility rights. This year, she also joined the People with Lived Experience Committee of the Canadian Pain Society to continue her advocacy. It was named as their first ever pain champion at their annual scientific meeting in Banff in front of over 500 luminaries in pain research and treatment. And there's much more that you can find about Tara on her website. So we will definitely put that in the chat so you can learn even more about her. And as always, remember that while the information shared here tonight is helpful, please consult your physician for personalized medical advice. Now, before I turn it over to Jim, be sure to leave your questions for Tara in the chat on Facebook and on YouTube, and we will get through them at the end of this amazing talk. But that's it for me, and I know the two of you will take it from here.
Thank you, Alexis.
Tara, thank you for coming. Before we begin, I just want to encourage our listeners to really go to our YouTube channel and also our Facebook, because we had a fabulous, hopeful lecture by Dr. Snyder, Dr. PT. He actually was talking from his bomb shelter in Israel to us, and it was fabulous. Talked about neuroplasticity, and that regardless of how it impacted your life is by CRPS, there's always hope. And that talked about the importance of movement. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I mean, Tara is an unbelievably diverse individual. I don't think we even talked about that you're a UNICEF ambassador, right?
That's right. Yeah, I've been a UNICEF ambassador since 2007, and I've done some disability advocacy for them in more recent years. I've had lived experience myself, but also have been their national champion for child survival. And of course, we know with everything going on in the world today, how important and urgent that is on a humanitarian level. And I just want to say also what an honor it is to be here with you. And Jim, thank you for your advocacy, and thank you to the RSDSA for everything you do, because like probably many people watching right now, when I first got a diagnosis of CRPS, I did not know what it was. And I went looking online for resources, and you were just one of those places where I could go and learn a lot. So just thank you so much for everything you do in the advocacy and awareness space, and in terms of educating others. It made a huge difference to my life. So I just wanted to say straight up, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor and privilege for our team. It's not just me, it's our team to serve the CRPS community. And what I really would love to focus on tonight is your journey. I mean, you have a unique experience of being treated for your CRPS in 3 different countries, in Australia, in Canada, and now in the United States. And so tell us about that, please.
Thank you. It is It's an honor to be in the space I'm in right now in this moment in time, because it is easier for me to speak. It's easier for me to be able to have the energy to talk about CRPS. I've been an advocate in this space for a few years now, but I have freed up a lot of energy by being in remission, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But my journey has been about an 8 year journey. It's coming up to 8 years. Initially, I had a hip injury that took place in Australia, and that led to CRPS. It initially was in the hip and then extended down the leg, eventually to the full leg, that full limb. And as a lot of people with CRPS would be familiar with, that spread and the terrible burning and difficulty weight bearing that brought. It stayed in the lower limb for quite a number of years, and I tried everything to sort of figure out what my body needed and find treatments that worked for me. I tried quite a number of things in Australia without very much success. I came to Canada in 2000. I was born and raised in Canada, so I came back home in part because I was by then fairly disabled and unable to ambulate without a mobility aid, which was often a wheelchair. So my condition varied from day to day with flares and so on, but increasingly it was very difficult to weight bear at all. And in Canada, and in Australia, but then also in Canada, I was using a wheelchair. And I guess one of the real low points for me was at one point we moved my bedroom into the living room so that I could actually be able to see people, because otherwise I would be just stuck in a room in the side of this small house with no contact with the outside world. It was extremely difficult for me to be upright, even sitting fully upright, and leaving the house was extremely difficult. And so those were pretty dark times. And as things got more and more difficult, and I had that diagnosis of CRPS, unfortunately, it didn't automatically come with lots of information. People often, give commiserations on a diagnosis, but of course, a diagnosis is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a first step to an action plan. It's just that when it comes to CRPS, the thoughts around the action plan, or the plan around the action plan, if you will, is often lacking. A lot of doctors don't know what it is, or if they do know what it is, they do not know how to treat it, or the treatments that are available are they can be very inadequate for many people. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen. It doesn't mean there's no hope. There is hope, but it can be very difficult to find what works for a person, and just to get good, adequate, accessible care for CRPS when there's so little understanding of it in the medical community. So that was my experience in Australia. In Canada, I found that they understood CRPS maybe a little bit better. That was just the professionals that I came across, and the experience is going to be different for everyone. But I did find a couple of experts here who had more information for me. That was very helpful. But again, we weren't getting very far. My condition continued to deteriorate. And like I said, I had these now a constellation of symptoms. So it wasn't only the pain, which was a burning pain. It had by then turned to a cold burning, an ice cold burning. And I was told that I had cold CRPS, which again is often spoken about as being even more difficult. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Once you have cold CRPS, that's it. There's nothing we can do for you, is literally what I was told numerous times. And I say that as someone who right now is relatively pain-free. So, keep in mind that you can be told things on this journey that can be quite devastating to hear. And just know that everybody's journey is different. Everyone's journey is different. And don't let someone tell you there's no hope, because you will hear all kinds of things and your journey is not going to be like anyone else's. It's not one size fits all.
And
So
during your journey, did you put a team together, or was it just this practitioner try something, then I go to the next practitioner? How did that work out?
getting practitioners to communicate was difficult.
Mhm.
The multidisciplinary approach, which I believe is absolutely vital in helping people with CRPS or really any complex condition or any chronic condition. Now that I'm not a physician, but I think that you absolutely cannot treat someone adequately for complex regional pain syndrome with a single intervention, a single action, right?
Mhm.
And I believe that is understood now by many pain specialists. We need to treat the whole person. And again, I love that that is the focus of what you're looking at this week, treating the whole person. So what was happening, unfortunately, was kind of a little bit here and a little bit there. Pharmaceutical medications can help with certain symptoms, but they're not necessarily going to help you to actually get into remission in many cases. Ketamine infusions help a lot of people, but again, you're not necessarily tackling the things that are going to help them to get into remission. Everyone's experience is different, but it seems like there's often this sort of a single thing that's done, and then that's it. There's not a lot of follow-up. I was fortunate to get into the Royal Jubilee Hospital pain program here in my hometown in Canada, and was very grateful to be able to get into that program because they had an 18-month waiting list, which, by the way, I think is a crime. They need more support. They're an excellent team, and they need more funding and support. If you have something like CRPS and you're living with that, you need help now, not in 18 months. You need it now. And being able to get into that program was helpful for me because they started to look at it as more of a team effort, as you mentioned, the A team, so to speak. Um, Sadly, they're not given as much funding as they should be. There were many treatments they could not make available, but they did introduce me to some new concepts. They did have a physiotherapist familiar with CRPS. They did have a psychologist familiar with CRPS,
Mhm.
and they had a little bit more familiarity with the syndrome, and just that familiarity. I mean, at that stage, it had been years and years of this. Sadly for me, the CRPS spread in the end of 2021. So about 2 years ago. And that was a real wake-up call to me. I was already in a very bad way, as I mentioned. Um, and as a novelist, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, my brain means a lot to me, my mind, my ability to think, and we all value ourselves as part of our identity. And when the CRPS spread, I experienced more brain fog, and now my full right side was affected, including my oh gosh, I don't usually stutter this much. This is how difficult it is to talk about for me. So I hope
Mhm.
you'll excuse the difficulty I'm having with speaking about this. It was the most challenging thing I've been through, and I've had a few ups and downs in my life.
Yeah.
But once it had spread to the full right side, my right arm was affected and my right hand, and I could no longer write on a computer. And I already at that point was unable to walk, unable to get outside very much. And I had difficulties with temperature regulation. I was developing gastroparesis, massive issues with brain fog and dizziness, nausea, and other related aspects of CRPS. And that was like, now it's the full right side of my body. And I
Any,
would go,
I'm
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just saying, any EDS, any connective tissue involvement?
No, we've looked at that and apparently no, no
Mhm.
EDS in my particular case, but that is often linked. Um, I would go kind of blue on one side of my body with regularity,
Mm.
CRPS, and so it was incredibly difficult. And of course, not meeting other people in person who had CRPS. Mostly, it was meeting people online. And that connection online, the disability community, the CRPS community, just means so much to me because they were a real lifeline, including RSDSA. And I really thank you for that. So what began to turn it around for me was there were a couple of things. The Royal Jubilee Hospital Pain Clinic introduced me to some simple methods to activate the parasympathetic nervous system mode. So again, as a non-physician, I'll just run through some of the things that I learned that helped me along this road. And one of them was really understanding that my body with CRPS was stuck in sympathetic nervous system mode. So that's fight or flight. And that is going to be the case for most people with chronic pain conditions or with PTSD or CRPS. In your fight or flight mode, you're going to have difficulty getting your body to heal. Healing is activated in your rest and digest mode, your parasympathetic mode. And one of the things the Royal Jubilee Hospital did is really talk about that directly, which I hadn't had discussed at any length previously. They taught me things like box breathing, which is just a simple way. You breathe in through the nose, hold, out through the mouth, hold, and you do it in this slow pattern. It helps to engage the parasympathetic mode. I started to get interested in meditation, and I started getting interested in grounding. These are really simple, free things that people can be empowered to do themselves. Yes, around the various treatments and interventions they're having, but these are things you can do yourself. And as I began to meditate more, I realized that this was actually helping my body to start to switch into that parasympathetic mode. And the science is very good behind this. The next thing I did was to pick up this book called Putting Out the Fire by Dr. Katinka. Some of you will know her. She's got the Spiro Clinic. It took me 3 years to get to her clinic because we needed to save. We needed to get me the time off, and we needed to get through the wait list, which was long at that time. But again, she talked about things like the parasympathetic mode and the importance of connecting with your inner healer. And I realized that really external interventions were going to only have a certain level of effect. The Royal Jubilee Hospital also talked about, and the numbers won't be precise here, but they said basically when you're given a pain medication, it's going to knock down, say, 30%. The things that you're doing yourself is going to knock down another 30%. Yeah. And the rest of it is the pain you're going to keep living with. Right? So as long as the root cause is not addressed, the idea of being pain-free is a little bit of a painkiller is a bit of a misnomer as a term. What it's doing is dulling the pain sensations, but they're not removed completely. And anyone with CRPS will relate to the fact that you don't get to be actually pain-free. And even being in remission doesn't mean there's no pain at all. It just means the dial is turned way, way down now, thankfully. So for me, it was a very long journey actually finally worked for me. And it wasn't until this year that we managed to get me to the Spiro Clinic. I had by then started to experience improvements. Some of them around the sort of at-home techniques that I mentioned. I began meditating daily. I began even doing things like Reiki, which I've since learned and become a practitioner of because it helped me personally. And it's very good for relaxing a body that is wounded, a body that still feels very much in fight or flight, still feels very much traumatized by that level of pain.
Could you just elaborate on that a little?
Which aspect?
Of the Reiki.
Reiki, yes. So Reiki was developed in Japan about 100 years ago by Dr. Mikao Usui. And it, interestingly, has a very interesting history. It was developed in Japan, and then during World War II, a general actually adapted it to be used in the military. So he created hand positions that were explained in a booklet given to their military so that if there were no paramedics or hospitals nearby, on a battlefield, soldiers could actually help someone who was wounded using Reiki. Now, the studies on Reiki are varied, but the things that we do see, 100% see, is that it helps with PTSD, it helps with relaxation and insomnia, and it helps with chronic pain. This is so interesting to me. And I think the reason why this energy healing method that's very old, the reason why it works for those things, I think, again, traces back to the parasympathetic mode. So now that I've trained in Reiki 1 and 2 and practitioner level, and I work with clients, there's an amazingly large number of people who fall asleep on my table within about 5 minutes. So, their shoulders will drop and they will go to sleep. And that, for me, it just reminds me of when my sympathetic mode finally switched to parasympathetic, and I just went, oh, it's that inner healer that we have, that we need to be in contact with, that we need to allow to do that work. And no matter how many interventions we have, no matter how much good medicine we're able to get, if we don't have our parasympathetic mode activating normally and in balance, if our sympathetic is overrunning and is running the show, we will not be able to fully heal because we're not in healing mode. It's actually difficult to digest food, which is one of the reasons why, unfortunately, so many people with CRPS do have digestive issues that develop, including myself. And I would describe it as mild gastroparesis now, as well as POTS, all relating to the CRPS experience over the last 8 years. It affects the whole body.
Well, thank you for that. I threw you a curve, but continue, please.
Yeah. Okay. So, I recognize that I'm not talking very smoothly, and that is because, although I'm a public speaker, I'm talking about some of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. The feeling of hopelessness and helplessness that I experienced at various times, sometimes in medical settings, was really distressing. And my heart goes out to every person out there going through that right now who, needs treatment and needs assistance and care, and is not feeling safe in those care settings. It's something that no one should have to experience, and unfortunately is something that people with CRPS seem to experience disproportionately. So the long story, the 8-year journey, involved, really accessing my parasympathetic mode, learning meditation, yes, learning Reiki in my case, and grounding and starting to really rethink my lifestyle, not because there was anything wrong with the lifestyle that I had. I liked it very much and it was good, but because my body could not do that anymore. Likewise, the foods I was eating were very good foods, and in fact, I had a very clean diet. But CRPS had changed things for me, and I needed to change what I was eating as a result. And one of the things I really learned in my case was that some of the foods I was eating was causing further inflammation in my body. We already have far too much inflammation if we have CRPS. And so my body became very sensitive to further inflammation and any foods that cause that. And foods that are great for you. So here I was, Jim, if you can imagine, trying desperately to help my immune system and recognizing that my white blood cell count was going down every year. I got it tested. Very alarming to me. No one seemed to be able to help me with it. So I was having lemon and turmeric and ginger and really trying. And that's a really good thing to do, except that I did food intolerance testing, and those things came up as things my body wouldn't tolerate, which is so interesting. And when I got the results of these intolerance tests, I rejected them outright, Jim. I just looked and I said, well, there's no way. I had no problems with food as a kid. I have none of it was manifesting as digestive issues. So I just said, well, this is wrong. I don't have all these allergies and digestive issues. And I started testing each one of them, and all of them were right. And it was not that they are bad foods. And it's not even that they're foods I can't ever have again. It's just that right now, with my body in crisis mode, it could not handle these particular foods that had, a lot of heat in them or other particular elements that my body was not responding well to. So even though they're great for the immune system, great for 99% of people, most people watching this right now, those are great
Right.
things. Have your turmeric and your ginger and your lemon.
Yeah.
But
Who were you working with to point that out to you? What type of yeah.
I first learned about it in Dr. Katinka's book, and she talks in there about people with CRPS needing to completely rebuild their gut. I did not understand when I first read it what that was or that it would apply to me. I sent out for food intolerance testing online, and there are places that can do that. I got those results. I went, what? And I went to see a good, reputable doctor locally who's a naturopath. Now, in Australia, they don't unfortunately work very well with naturopaths in my experience. So your GP is unlikely to refer you to a naturopath in Australia. In Canada, they likely will refer you to a naturopath. Naturopaths here are doctors and have done medical training as well, and they've specialized in naturopathy. So again, there's another link. Why is it so difficult to get these multidisciplinary teams together? Some of it, frankly, is politics and not helpful. So when I came to Canada and I found that the local hospital could refer me to a good physiotherapist and a good naturopath, that was enormously helpful to me and helpful for me on my journey. So the food component, it probably took me a year to really figure out that every single one of those things coming up, it really was affecting me in a negative way. And I recognized that being in the position I was in there, again, no judgment, because none of the things I was eating, I could eat whatever I want. You can do whatever you like. But what was happening in reality is I could be eating something that was a very good and healthy food, and my body was taking it on like an inflammatory toxin. And that's just what was happening. That was reality for my body at that stage. Some of those things have shifted, thankfully, but my body was in crisis mode. My gastroparesis was getting worse. My ability to digest food properly was becoming more of a visible problem for me, or a noticeable problem for me, where it wasn't when I first heard about it. And that was a big component to recognize that the foods I was eating as a person with CRPS, as a person whose body feels like it's in fight or flight and is in crisis, those foods are very rarely going to be neutral. Things are going to be either healing and anti-inflammatory, or they're going to be inflammatory. And that was just the lot that I had drawn as a person with CRPS at this stage. So I began to take that very seriously. And this is the boring stuff, that you speak with a lot of people with CRPS or with chronic conditions, and they go, yeah, I don't eat gluten, don't eat meat, don't drink alcohol. Again, it's not a judgment call. It's literally like, I will live better. My body is happier if I don't do that stuff. And I just literally, I value my use of my right arm, much more than I value having a cocktail. So that was a change for me. Even though I'd had a very, I think, healthy lifestyle, it needed further changes. Some of them fairly radical in terms of diet.
What helped your POTS? Because that's a major problem for some people with CRPS.
Yeah, it's a major problem. I've found that my POTS first of all, I was diagnosed kind of late, and I very much feel like it's part of the syndrome. So your nervous system and your body it's not communicating well. Your body systems are not coping very well, because your body, again, as a non-physician, I'm going to say your body can only handle so much. You're in masses of pain. You're dealing with a whole bunch of invisible and visible things. And your body's just like, I'm sorry, I just cannot deal with your balance right now, or I cannot, constrict my blood vessels fast enough so that you're not going to feel lightheaded. It's just not going to be functioning very well in a number of systems. And that got to be a huge problem for me, because I would, pain would go up. I would just about pass out and throw up. I had pre-syncope. So I was very fortunate that I didn't actually vomit in those episodes or actually uh, fall down.
Mhm.
But I would come very close and I had to get straight on the ground, sometimes in airports, on the side of the road. I mean, it was a very difficult thing to live with. And often I had leeway of about 30 seconds or less. When I felt that come on,
Mhm.
it's a very non-negotiable feeling
Sure.
of nausea and dizziness, and I just needed to immediately lie down wherever I was. So that was very difficult. What I found is that as I improved my diet to support my body where it is, you got to meet yourself where you are. As I improved the diet and figured out the puzzle of what my body needed right now, and as I began to move towards remission as part of that, I began to turn down the inflammation in my body, turn down some of the pain. I found that my POTS improved. It's still there, but it's improved. And taking good quality electrolytes every day is a part of that improvement as well. It's what my body requires, those electrolytes, and that's a good thing anyone with POTS can do. And probably their doctors have spoken to them about it already. If your doctor has mentioned it to you, take it extremely seriously. Your life is going to be much easier if you take electrolytes, if you've had that issue with POTS, or if your doctor has requested that you take electrolytes. I really did not understand just how important that was. So
Thank
for
you.
me, it was a as you can tell, a long process. There was no year that went by where I didn't try new things. When I couldn't weight bear at all, I knew I had to try to keep active. I was worried about my heart, worried about maintaining some level of health, because I know that's easy to have those things unravel. So one thing that worked for me that was suggested by an excellent doctor was to do water walking, which I
Yes.
highly recommend for
Mhm.
anyone watching right now. If you can at all tolerate water, go water walking. Go get one of those flotation belts, and I've got videos of this on my Instagram. Get a clip-on flotation belt, or your local pool will have them hanging on the side of the wall potentially. Put that on. It's going to support you in the water. And the first time I tried that, and this was after already years of CRPS, I cried. I got in the water and I was weightless. And because at that point my CRPS was only in the lower right leg, it was excruciating and I was in pain all the time. And when I got in that water and was weightless, it was such relief. It was such relief. Because even sitting, of course, you're putting pressure on your hip, pressure on your body.
Yeah.
Finally, I was weightless. So I always tried to find a way to keep moving. And I believe, you're touching on that earlier, the importance of movement.
Yes.
Much easier said than done. Much easier said than done. And I recognize that it is so hard sometimes with CRPS to keep moving, with fatigue, with pain, with allodynia, which I had extremely severely. But there are ways, and it's about continuing to search for things that work for you. For me, water therapy was a huge thing. No, I don't have a private pool, unfortunately, but trying to find a place where the water was a temperature I could tolerate was an ongoing experiment.
Yeah.
Found my thing, I found a place I could go, and mostly
Yeah.
if I had a bit of bad luck and it was too cold out or it's whatever, it was sometimes not as helpful. But for
Right.
the I found things that worked, and it was
Yeah.
just an ongoing search.
Yeah.
And that brought me eventually to the Spiro Clinic
Mhm.
earlier this year. By the time I reached the Spiro Clinic, again, I mentioned it was about 3 years it took for us to get there. We needed to save money. I needed to
Mm.
have the hope and belief that it was worth taking that gamble, seeing if it would work for me. I had tried pretty much everything else, and I had experienced some improvement. I think Mostly from meditation, from Reiki, and from
Mhm.
the food changes in my
Breathing. Mhm.
things. Because even when I was keeping movement up and doing the water therapy, I was, the spread came still after that. So I still was really not quite giving my body everything that it needed to
Mhm.
get into remission. And when we got to the Spiro Clinic, it was hard work. I'll be completely honest. They have a great supportive team, but it is tough. And for me, I was completely off medication by that point, which was wonderful and helped as well with some of the symptoms I was getting. Some of the brain fog and
Mhm.
vision issues had become quite difficult with medications I'd previously tolerated. I was no longer tolerating. And a lot of you will be familiar with that game. It happens to all of us after a while. So I was not on any medications, and we began doing neuromuscular re-education, and that's hard. Um, if I was to describe what it was like, people talk about, climbing that mountain, going up the mountain. I'd say, well, this is a bit more like going through the mountain. The mountain's there.
Yeah.
You're going right through the mountains, the mountains of Morea. You're gonna face the Bell Rock and just really battle that, and come out the other side and seeing so many other people with CRPS, hearing so many stories of people, how they got there, what their experience has been like, whether it was for 6 months, 8 years, or 25 years.
Yeah.
Then seeing their improvements was really, it did give me hope that even though some of the treatments were very challenging, that I should give it my best. And
Yeah.
in my case, it worked. The
How many
neuromuscular.
months were you there?
I was 2.5 months in the
Mhm.
program, and if I was to guesstimate, I would say it was about 165 hours of dedicated treatment in my case. So, a difficult process, a long time there, nowhere near as long as some of the other people who came. I was able to use a rollator walker when I arrived, so I wouldn't say graduated from wheelchair because it fluctuated, but I was at that stage where I was able to use my rollator. I was therefore able to get a bit more movement. And I was able to be, as they call, a super responder when I was at the clinic. So the treatment really did work for me. We also discovered chronic bacterial and viral conditions that were underlying my condition, and that it's very typical. A lot of people there have Lyme or Epstein-Barr, undiagnosed. Mine was different, but again, everybody's different. When you start peeling back the layers of the onion, you go, what all is the body dealing with? Why is the body not quite able to heal? What's going on? And for me, that was part of the
Talk about now that you've achieved almost full remission. What do you do every day to continue?
thank you. So for me, gosh, life is just, I feel like I could cry just thinking about it. My life is so different and so much easier every day. I can't even begin to describe, and I really want to tell myself pre-remission that it's okay. There's going to be a time where you're not going to be in pain always. So I try to get to the gym every say 3 or 4 days a week, something like that.
Mhm.
I walk to the gym and I walk through a forest. I'm really fortunate to be able to do that. I don't do a lot at the gym right now because I need to continue to build up. I do have some atrophy in mostly the right leg, particularly the hip and upper leg. So I work on that pretty specifically at the gym, and I do it gently and I do it with love to my body that's been through so much. The walking there and walking back is just wild to me because I've lived in this area for a little while and never walked the streets. I mean, I only ever saw it out the window of my vehicle, which was, adapted in my wheelchair in the back. So it's been a pretty big change for me. And I've been back for about a month and a half or something. So it's new for me. So I'm walking to the gym. I do box jumps. And the reason I do those, we were doing them during the neuromuscular re-education sessions right at the end. It was sort of like just before I graduated, we reached the stage where I could do that. Before I went, even though I was improving on my own, the idea of even stomping my right foot on the ground was just horrifying to contemplate. I couldn't imagine. I still had very bad allodynia, and I couldn't imagine any sort of impact. Doing box jumps, being able to jump off a surface and land and have it not hurt is really extraordinary to me. And I want to keep my body comfortable with that level of impact. So I do box jumps. Again, talking like 6 or 7 of them, very much watching my form. I will jump and I will go and I'll do a squat. And I'll get up again and I'll jump off the box and do a squat. And it's important for me to maintain that level of comfort with that movement. What else have I been doing? Well, yeah, more of the things that helped me to prepare for remission or get towards remission. So I meditate, I do Reiki on others. I'm very careful about having too much coffee. I'm really careful about having too much loaded into my schedule. And those things that every human has a right to do, but I know will have risks for me as a person who's in remission with CRPS. So I have to make changes, maybe not always changes that I would like, but changes that my body requires.
Right.
I also use the PRS. So there's, they call it a PRS, a personal recovery system, which is really just like a muscle stimulator. And I use a little pack for that, and I will put the pads on my hot spots, so areas actually very much where the scars are from my hip surgery. And I will turn that up to a comfortable level and let that be stimulated. So it's in part about really keeping those areas moving,
Right.
and exercise and walking, and a little bit of impact, being careful and loving and giving myself some impact, being comfortable with that, and then also some muscle stimulation and making sure that both sides of the body are communicating. So, in the pool, I'm moving back and forth. Again, this was something physio taught me for CRPS, was to gentle movements for the nervous system. That's cross body. I continue with cross body movements, gentle movements, and then those impact movements. There's a few high impact movements just to keep comfortable with that. And yeah, I don't drink, and I don't drink, don't smoke, don't eat gluten, and don't have meat, and all those things.
That's fine. I want to thank you.
Body needs it to be. Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing your story, but I'm a fan of your writing. I've read one of your books. I love it. And tell me about your writing career before we go to our questions.
Of course. Thanks, Jim. And thank you everyone for listening. I mean, I know everybody's journey is very different, and I hope in some way it's given some hope that things can change even after 7.5 years of 24/7 pain. Everybody's different. And I was told so many times, especially once I had cold CRPS, that I would never improve. And that just is not the case. So I feel very fortunate to be where I am right now. Now, 10 years ago, I hadn't even gone through this experience at all. And I wrote a book called The Fictional Woman, which is a memoir. It's really looking at the archetypes around women and girls, how we talk about women and girls, how we write about them in our fiction and our stories. This book's about to come out in the UK. This is the UK edition of The War Widow, my historical fiction series set in the 1940s. And it came out in the US looking like this, probably still in your bookshops. And the follow-up to that is The Ghosts of Paris. And it's actually interesting, Jim, to talk about my writing, because this experience of CRPS, particularly now being in remission, I have to think about the number of hours I write, my body position, and how many breaks I take. And I'm looking at that differently than I did before remission, because I had so much pain all the time that it was hard to distinguish what was helping and what was making it worse. Now I have a more sensitivity, if you will, to be able to differentiate. And it means that if I'm in the wrong position, I just have to stop. I'm still rethinking my office, my desk, my hours, because my health comes before anything like anything career wise, especially after what I've been through. So I have more learning to do
Yeah,
about my body, what it needs, and actually how I apply that to my work.
yeah. And you're a mother too, right?
Yeah, I've got a beautiful 12-year-old, Safira. She was at the clinic holding my hand literally through
Yeah.
difficult sessions. She's a trooper.
What a support system, right? Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, she lived with me with CRPS for longer than without. So
Yes.
she have only very vague memories of me like hiking around with her on my back across Europe. I used to be a big hiker, love nature. And we had a trampoline. I'd jump around the trampoline and we did all those fun things together. But she was not quite 5 when I was injured. So now she's
Yeah.
12 and this
Yeah.
is a new world for her and for me to be able to go and do fun things differently now.
Absolutely. I mean, what a blessing. It's great.
Absolutely.
Alexis, why don't you come back and we'll involve our community.
Of course. Thank you for this. And I've been chatting with our folks over on Facebook and YouTube this time. But I do have a few questions, and I did put this in the chat. But of course, if you have additional questions, please ask while we're here. We have some time left. So first question I have, I was going to jump in and ask, but I didn't want to interrupt because we were on a roll. Hopefully I didn't miss this. Do you have a source you can recommend to learn more about Reiki? I know you
Oh,
talked about it for a little bit.
I love that. There's the International Reiki Association. They're amazing. Um, you will probably have whatever city you're in the world now, you'll probably have a good reputable Reiki master there who is a teacher, master teacher, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction as well. And interestingly, I don't know the stats for the US, but I know in Canada there's an increasing number of hospitals that are including Reiki as complementary therapies. It's less than half, but I think it's getting around to be 30% or so where they're using that now as a complement to assist people with healing from surgeries or for mental health, PTSD in particular. I believe in the US, the military has put some money into Reiki for returned veterans because of the way it's assisting them dealing with PTSD. So you'll see some interesting studies around that. And I think we'll probably get more studies as a result of that, that financial backing with the military as they see that success for vets. So yeah, check out the Reiki Association. And there's also a great, I think it's Complementary Health Association that, I feel like I'll want to get those links. I'll maybe put them online later, that go through all kinds of things that can, again, assist. And this is all just supporting the other things that you're doing. So whether it's Tai Chi or yoga or Reiki, even at the Royal Jubilee Hospital, they trialed virtual reality with me, and I was part of that trial, and it was helpful for me when my pain was still very high. I was using it for meditation apps on the virtual reality headset, and it was very helpful for me. Now I meditate without it, and that's being used by other friends of mine that are dealing with chronic pain. So anyway, I hope you find some Reiki information that's helpful for you.
And we're going to have a virtual reality session later this week.
Fantastic. Yeah, I find some of the apps are just incredible. I think Nature VR is one of the ones I like. Nature Trek, um, and Trip is another
Okay.
one. They do meditation and box breathing in beautiful surroundings, beautiful like virtual reality surroundings.
Yeah.
It's quite fun. Oh, I've just lost my light, but that's okay. You can still see me.
Yes, it can. All right, here's another question. Ever have your diagnosis taken away or questioned by other physicians?
Always questioned. Every person, for example, at the Spiro Clinic, I'll keep speaking about that because it was so extraordinary to be in a room with another 40 odd people who also had CRPS, and often very visible CRPS, classic CRPS, and they all had stories about being told it wasn't CRPS. Every single one of them. And knowing something about CRPS, you're looking at them and you're like, this is absolute classic visible CRPS, and they'd already been through that. So I had 5 positive CRPS diagnoses in 3 different countries and two different continents. But between all of them, of course, it's not like they're taking away a diagnosis. It's not like a certificate you get that says you have that and then they're taking it. But of course, you're going to run into people who don't know what it is. Or if you're having a good day and my leg's not blue, they might say, oh, I don't see I can't tell the temperature difference, or I don't see the coloration. And it's like, well, wait 6 hours and you'll see. So don't let that, just know that you're not alone if you find that diagnosis is a slippery thing. And stick with it, continue to research and find people who know what it is. And just know that every person I've ever met with CRPS has run into issues, initially at least, with being unclear around diagnosis.
And it's all in your head.
Yes, that's the all in your head thing, which, that's the thing, that we are layered, and complex regional pain syndrome is complex by nature, by name. And the biopsychosocial model for pain is great, but boy, I don't like it when they try to narrow it down to biopsychosocial means it's in your head. It is not. Yeah. It is real, and it is really important to get support and treatment. People deserve treatment for CRPS, and too often they don't get it.
Amen. Mm-hmm.
Someone just commented and said on YouTube and said, I was diagnosed in 2011 and I'm still being gaslit. And stories like this we hear on and on.
I hate that. I hate hearing that, and I sympathize, and I've had that experience, and I've unfortunately heard that from every person I've met with CRPS, and down to little kids, which is what really kills me. So meeting kids who've been gaslit about what they're going through, or had their parents told that it's in the child's head, and that being an obstacle to them getting adequate treatment, I think is just criminal.
Tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about taking care of Maya, and it's medical kidnapping. It's not just CRPS, a lot of rare diseases.
Yep. No, it's alarming. I think this is why the raising of awareness is so important, and the understanding is so important. And knowing that it is literally complex, like it's not going to present precisely the same for every person.
Right.
And certainly not in the 10 minutes you might be given in a doctor's appointment. You have
absolutely correct.
People need to be listened to. They need to be heard. And if a system does not allow for that, it's not going to be a very good system of healing.
Yes. Alexis, we're taking away from you. Go.
This is great discussion. This is what it's all about. So this person saying, what would you say is the first step that you took towards getting moving and being able to get functional use again? And they had a few examples: pain management, physical therapy. Is it really mental health? Like, what was your first step to realizing, you had to move forward?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, but I'm going to be really tricky and give you an unpopular answer and say it can't just be one step, because if I was to give you one thing, it would be inadequate. There's a bunch of things you need to do. One is recognizing that movement really will help you, and that might seem a little counterintuitive when you're in pain and you don't want to move the part that hurts. So just understand that. But having said that, again, it would be inadequate for me to just give that answer, because classic dry physiotherapy, I'm going to call it, made me worse, seemingly. So I needed to get in the water. I needed a warmth. In my case, I needed warm water and a weightlessness. And when I went into a classic physiotherapy session, they would focus on trying to strengthen the hip and the area of the pain, and that would aggravate my symptoms rather than helping them. So find ways that you can move. Just knowing it's you, it's your own body, find ways that you can move, whether it's in the water, whether it's on an electric bike that's going to give you a little assistance and keep you moving, whether it's in a gymnasium or with a physio who understands at least something about CRPS. That can be hard to find. The food component was very big in my case, and for some of you it will also be big. It might be hard to know that before you start really looking into it and drilling down into that. And I would say read some books. You know, Dr. Andrea Furlan, she's Canadian. I think there's excellent information in this book. It's not CRPS specific, but it is relevant 100% to CRPS. And I do think Dr. Katinka's book was very helpful for me to understand some of the mechanisms that work in CRPS and to help to inform me about that. So I'm sorry that I've got such a big answer to such a simple question. It's also really annoying when people suggest that you meditate. So I get that, but I'm also going to say that whether it's virtual reality calming programs, like meditation programs, classic meditation, or like some form of adapted yoga. I was doing wheelchair yoga at some point. Do try something that resonates with you, that you're able to do, which is going to help you get into parasympathetic mode. It's an important part of the process. So just find the version that works for you to help the process.
I think you said it perfectly. Like, there's so many different things. I mean, I know the one thing we always, tell our words is like, what are you going to fill up your toolbox with? And so, there's one thing that you can start with, but, you're going to need multiple tools to really, fight this beast. So
that's right. It's a big, I can't help but feel like no one should have to go through this, but hey, we're here. We got to meet our bodies where we're at. What's happening is happening. And so you're going to have to do something different than the friends you have, the family that you have who are not going through this. And get that toolkit going, get your heat blanket, get your water therapy, try, in Canada, people are trying cannabis, or they're trying ketamine infusions in hospital, they're trying naturopathic methods, whatever it is, just try the different things, see what works for you. There's not a one size fits all for this really complex condition, but it is worthwhile to continue to try and to know that things can get better. You can get better. This is not a hopeless disease. There's hope, and things can change.
Dr. Chopra always says, add 5% here, 5% here, and it adds up.
It does. It does.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say is we have another great session on Qigong later on this week too. So we're getting it.
Well, it's great. And it's not again, I think there's been a little politics involved at times in medicine where it's kind of like, well, our way is the one way, there's only a surgical intervention, or there's only, ketamine, or there's only this particular wonder drug or whatever. Anything that's a magic bullet isn't actually going to be false. It's not going to work. You need a multidisciplinary approach, and it needs to be tailored to you. And you are in the best position to decide what's working for you. So find your A team if you can. Find your toolkit. Find things that work for you, and know that you're not alone.
And someone just said in the chat, you mentioned earlier about water walking and water therapy. There's been a few conversations there, and I think you mentioned, or someone mentioned, about not having a pool. I guess it was you. And someone just said, I use my kiddie pool during summers for some water PT. So you will always find a way. People will always find a way. So that's a great idea. If you can't go to the community pool, you don't have a pool, you may be able to grab a kiddie pool from your local store. So that's a good short.
One thing I found when I was still, I was improving somewhat, but could not weight bear, is I got an electric trike. The trike is very balanced, so I didn't have to use my I'm going to say my difficult leg, my vocal leg that had issues with weight bearing. I didn't have to use that to steady myself when I stopped the bike at the light or whatever. I could sit on the trike, and I used a captain seat shape because I couldn't sit on a classic bicycle seat. Thankfully, I can sit on a regular seat now. In fact, this is my Reiki chair that I use in sessions. I could never have dreamed of sitting on a seat like that, even a few months ago when my allodynia was still very bad. I also tried, I found out I could do kayaking, which was amazing. I had a really strong upper body at that stage because of my wheelchair and using my arms as my legs essentially to propel myself around. And I found that the angle of the seat with the right padding meant I could actually get into the kayak, and I just felt so good because I was free. I just world opened up to me that was low pain movement, which was just incredible and got me again into nature. And I'm sure helped with the parasympathetic mode, seeing the birds flying past in the water, really prioritizing that and understanding the science behind that. It's not just a luxury like, oh, you want to go out for a walk, you want to go hug a tree. It's like, actually, there's science behind spending time in nature and looking after yourself, and your body deserves it, and so do you. So find ways that you can, just whatever it is, whether it's getting out in a wheelchair or an electric trike or a kayak, or even just sitting outside, having someone bring you outside. If you're at that stage of the illness where you need someone else to push you, let them push you outside to a beautiful, safe spot with your blanket and just soak it up, because that is really good for you. Getting outside is really good. And I know that when that was really hard for me, it was part of my return to living again, really, was just finding ways to get me outside again and out of that bed.
So tell us how people could follow you. You're on many platforms. So
yes, I am. I am. So you can find me at Tara_Moss on Twitter, or X as it is known now. I'm at Tara Moss Author on Instagram, and also Tara and Wolfie. And Tara and Wolfie is named for my first mobility aid. Wolfie is a walking stick that I chose to purchase when I finally accepted that I needed to use mobility aids to get out and participate more fully in the world. That was Wolfie. So I named that account after Wolfie, and it has been very mobility aid and accessibility focused. So some of you will find that helpful. I think whatever aids you can get, they're tools in your toolkit. If you're finding you're spending too much time in bed, as in, you're not getting out and living enough, right? And I've been there. Think, well, maybe there's a tool that can help me with this, and just know, whatever age you are, whatever your situation, those are what those aids are made for, is to help you to get out and do that, living, participating in life. So yeah, that's what Tara and Wolfie is about. So you can find me there, and on Facebook at Tara Moss Author, also Tara and Wolfie. You find me all over the place. The Spirit of Healing is where I do Reiki work. And that's kind of a separate, newer thing for me the last couple of years. Mostly you'll see me on the bookshelves, but I really enjoy being able to work with people, particularly people who are experiencing pain or difficult times in their lives, and just giving them.
Did I read that you also have a podcast?
I'm hoping to have a new podcast soon, actually, on this topic, but I've had podcasts in the past, self-contained. So I did a true crime called The Man in the Balaclava, not CRPS related and not light material either, I will say. But I do plan to continue to advocate for people with disabilities, or as a person who's in pain, to be able to speak to those topics as a pain champion for the Canadian Pain Society and for Pain Australia. And as a UNICEF ambassador, to continue to speak to issues of disability and pain, because I believe they're human rights issues. I believe we deserve treatment and to be treated well, and to get care and respect. And that is sometimes patchy, and I'd like to see that change. So, the more we can all move towards that, the better.
Ditto. Alexis, anything else, my dear?
I think that's it for this evening. So I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you both for this great discussion. And I want to invite everyone back here tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Eastern as Brian Pope, managing partner in the Cochran firm, Texas, and our newest board member here at RSDSA. He's going to discuss lessons we can take away from the tragic story of Maya Kowalski from Take Care of Maya. So even if you have not watched the Netflix documentary, I know so many people could not watch it. Definitely very difficult. If you did watch it, if you couldn't watch it, please join us. I definitely think I know he will share some great lessons. He's amazing. So I'm looking forward to having Brian tomorrow evening. You can see our full week-long schedule for this conference on our website at rsds.org/events. If you have any questions, you can always send us a message. If you need a support group, if you're looking for a new physician, or if you want to tell your story on our blog or anything else, you need from us, send us an email at info@rsds.org. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for letting me tell my story and for
It's been wonderful. And we might come back and for Reiki, invite you to talk about it.
I would love that. That'd be an honor. I think it's been really helpful for me, so it might be helpful for some other people as well.
All right. Well, listen, enjoy your new life.
Well, thank you so much.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Alexis. You take everyone.